You know those weeks where you are absolutely at the top of your game. You are kicking ass, taking names, you don't care who knows it. I mean, yeah, me neither, because, I mean, that sounds exhausting. Hello Pickles and welcome to episode 26 of Knitting Vicariously. My name is Caroline. I'm found more commonly across Instagram and Ravelry as dunderknit. I am a knitter living here in London, and if this is your first time joining us here on the podcast, a massive hello and welcome to you. A brief word of warning up front as ever to let you know that this is a swearing friendly podcast and therefore the occasional curse word may well escape my lips. If you've been around for a while now, you'll know that's very much par for the course. And so if you are indeed coming back, I really hope you're well. Thank you so much, and it's great to see you again. I feel as though I talk about this most episodes now, but I will say the last couple of weeks really have notched up the kind of hecticness of the day-to-day. It has been very full on with work, and in the hours that I've managed to escape some work, I have been watching a little bit of Wimbledon coverage, catching up on some of that. It's also been ridiculously warm in the last couple of weeks and really quite humid, and I think I will use that as a bit of a means of explaining why I had kind of unintentionally unplugged a little bit from some of the things that I've been doing knitting wise, whether that be I've spent almost zero time on Instagram in the last couple of weeks. I've spent very little time on Ravelry outside of just kind of keeping tabs on the group, and obviously off the back of the previous episode where we spent quite a lot of time talking around some of the recent discussions, particularly Ravelry's extension of their ban on hate speech to include people who were coming out in support of Donald Trump and his policies. Obviously I spent a little bit of time keeping an eye on comments and moderating here and there, but for the most part I'm going to put my hands up and say it's been a very light couple of weeks knitting wise, and yeah, I'm still trying to ease back in off the back of that. Just touching on the previous episode, I do want to say a massive thank you to everyone who watched, who came back with messages, and some of those messages that were expanding on some of the points that I had raised, as well as giving me your responses to it. I did end up switching on the holding comments for review function on YouTube. Largely that is because in the hours that I spend at work or asleep, and sometimes there are some hours in between those things, but not as much, not as many as I would sometimes like, essentially that I'm not always able to keep very close tabs on what's happening as it's happening, and what I wanted to ensure was that there weren't any comments that were appearing there that were willfully dismissive of other people's experiences, specifically the experiences of BIPOC in particular, and so I wanted to ensure that I was keeping fairly close tabs and managing that as I go. What I will say is that overwhelmingly the response was very positive and in support of the messages that we talked through. However, there were a couple of comments that I chose not to publish, and those were largely on the grounds of them being quite openly dismissive or aggressive towards some of the points that we were talking through. There were some of them that really vehemently disagreed with this idea of inclusion and creating tolerant spaces as being ones that needed to prioritise groups and minorities that were perhaps less often heard, and therefore the idea that in order to encourage greater tolerance you need to exclude those who are being willfully intolerant, which I feel obviously glosses over the whole premise of privileged systemic racism and the marginalised experiences of others. There were some that felt incredibly aggrieved that their own political allegiances had been called out in quite this way, and were choosing to very much kind of centre themselves, their own feelings, their reactions to that, as opposed to what I feel we should be focusing on, which is the hate speech, the oppression, the bigotry that's been shown to others and marginalised groups by those who have similar allegiances. And there were some that just felt entitled enough to want to noisily unsubscribe. But here's the thing. This isn't going to go away. I'm not going to stop talking about it. The community is not going to stop talking about it. There is so much going on at the moment, and all of us are deeply fucking uncomfortable about all of this, right? But here's the thing with discomfort, is that is when you need to lean in, to learn, to listen, and to understand what is causing it, questioning it, and starting to think about how you can then go on changing your behaviour for the better. It's not about being nice to each other. It's not about posting a couple of conciliatory or supportive statements on various social media platforms and then going on about your day as if it's all done and dusted. It is so deeply uncomfortable right now, but that is part of the change that we're looking to try and embrace. And so I think it comes down to just starting to learn from that discomfort and really, really, most importantly, for those of us that are looking to try and to be increasingly supportive and attentive to the people around us who have been marginalised voices up until now, it is about learning to recognise and respond when you have fucked up. I mentioned that I've unplugged for the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to hold my hands up and say I haven't really opened Instagram more than a couple of times in the last fortnight or so. That being said, I am aware that a fellow British podcaster by the name of Nathan, who goes as the Sockmatician online, and he had written a particularly problematic post about the use of the diverse-knitty hashtag, and that this was then further escalated by his husband. Now, I don't know all of the detail around this. I don't want to talk about it too much without knowing all of the detail around this. However, what I will say, and we've seen this a few times now, is that I, as a white, middle-class, cisgendered person, am still in the process over the last kind of several months of trying to get the vaguest handle on just how fundamentally my privilege affects and impacts everything, and continues to affect and impact everything around me and the way that I see the world. Therefore, if I come out with a statement of something that I believe to be true, of my perspective on something, and I receive a considerable backlash from the people whose interests I believe that I'm aligned to and that I am out there to try and support, my gut instinct at this point in time, knowing that I am still trying to unpick all of this privilege, is probably not going to be to centre myself as the victim in all of this and to look around and say, well, hang on, why are people picking on me for just making this one statement? I am now aware enough of the privilege that I have to want to explore more about what it is of that original perspective that I've put forward that is, frankly and fairly obviously, so very problematic. We've seen this a few times now with a few individuals, and as far as I'm concerned, it keeps coming back to how you choose to respond when you're called out. And in this instance, as I say, I am starting to unpick some of my privilege, and I think increasingly my instinct is to look at that as being the problem rather than necessarily feeling the victim in this way. I've mentioned a couple of times here in the podcast that I actually work in the technology sector. I don't work in arts or the creative sector, and I'm conscious this is going to sound like a bit of a wanky privilege side point, but I do think it's an interesting one for us to discuss. So, technology companies fail all the fucking time. There are any number of companies whose ideas just don't work. I have worked in a number of technology companies that have failed, and failure is big and it is scary, and nobody sets out with the ambition of failing. But the best companies know that they will, and they prepare for it so that they are better placed to take advantage of it, to learn from it, to grow from it, as and when it inevitably happens. The likelihood is that all of us will fuck up at some point. And so rather than worrying about it, trying to avoid it, I mean, obviously, let's not set out with that as the objective, sure. But at the same time, let's try and prepare ourselves to embrace it and to learn from it as and when it does happen. So if I come out and make a statement that is absolutely fucking misguided, then I can turn around and be a better person for it and not centre myself and my own feelings at that point in time, but instead seek to learn from it and move forward. And a very wise person recently reminded me of the fabulous quote by Samuel Beckett, which I think is entirely applicable in this instance. Ever tried? Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. And on the subject of failing, So I have very little knitting to show for myself this week. In fact, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is probably the least amount of knitting I have done in a 2-week span for a very, very long time. To the point where I'm not even going to show you my knitting necessarily. It's honestly, I've knit about 3 inches on my as if tee. Clearly, I am not wearing it. That should give you a very strong initial indicator as to how well that's gone. I'm not even at the point where I've added in the mohair. I haven't separated for sleeves. Genuinely, it is a cylindrical, I mean, I'll show you it just for the shits and giggles of it all, right? But as ever, beautiful bag by Tanny Casey. Tanny did have more of these bags in stock in the last couple of weeks, so if you were lucky enough to grab one, I hope you love it. But she has these fabulous drawstring bags along with others in her Etsy store that I will link in the show notes below. But yeah, right, in terms of whips, I mean, it's slightly longer than it was last time you saw it, and now it does roll up a little bit, so it doesn't do myself quite full justice, but this is my as if tee. It's a pattern by Shay Johnson. I will put her picture of it up here on the screen. She has knit a fabulous, or designed rather, this fabulous t-shirt with the mohair silk section here up at the top, and then either worsted weight or fingering weight held double in the knitted section on the lower half. I am knitting this out of Madeline Tosh BFL silk fingering in the Nocturne colourway. It is beautifully colourful navy, as someone fabulously pointed out last week, where they said, oh good, you're knitting with colour. Navy, thank you. I mean, accurate. But yes, so I'm working with this, and then I have my mohair from Ching Fibres in the Okinami colourway that I will be adding in at some point. But in all honesty, I've had so little headspace, desire. I mentioned, so it's been really hot and muggy here for the last couple of weeks, between sort of coming back home from work in evenings, sitting down on a very hot sofa and watching a bit of Wimbledon with a very cold drink. I just, the knitting mojo has not been strong with me, and this is where I fully understand and appreciate all of the other crafters out there who deviate more to sort of sewing in the summer months, or if you feel so compelled to knit with linen and lightweight tops, more power to you. I'm just not in that headspace right now, and so yeah, apologies. My knitting this episode is pretty paltry, but I'm continuing to work on it, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more to show for myself next time around. And that's it. That is your knitting content for this week. I'm really fucking sorry. There was a comment that I got on last week's episode, which was one of the ones that I chose not to publish because it had a couple of points in it that I really, really struggled with being able to sort of place in the genuinely kind of safe and helpful zone. But one of them was around kind of, you know, didn't really care about me, my personal persuasions and who I was as a person. They were literally just here to see and hear about the knitting that I've been doing, because it was, after all, just a fucking knitting podcast. Yeah, sucks to be you right now, hey. Sorry, not sorry. I mean, this is real life, right? And in the subject and in the general kind of atmosphere of wanting to fail better, I am here sitting in front of you saying, yes, I am someone who tries to put out a bi-weekly knitting podcast, and I am holding my hand up and saying, do you know what? I've done fuck all knitting this fortnight, and yeah, sometimes life just gets in the way, and it's fine. I still wanted to come and talk to you. I did think about putting it off, but I thought, no, what I really want to do is come and just take a little bit of time, and it will be a little bit of time because I don't think this is going to be a particularly long episode, but just to talk to you about the gold along that we have running at the moment. So this is something that I mentioned on the previous episode, where in the spirit of getting ready for later on this year, where I will be attending Rhinebeck in October in upstate New York, and in the spirit of wanting to I guess kind of come together and celebrate all of the fabulous things that make up this amazing little corner of the internet that has formed around Knitting Vicariously, we decided that we were going to kick off a gold along, where we would take some real artistic license and leeway with our definition of gold, and I'll come on to that in a second, and to knit, crochet, sew, wear, generally embody in small or large part something gold that brings us together and cements us as a little bit of a community. And so as part of that, I wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's gone out of their way to show their support for it, who's started casting things on, who's been tagging me in pictures and kind of, I guess, Instagram posts where they've seen dyers that have fabulous gold colorways. I do try and check in and see them, although I'm aware that I've been a little bit absent from Instagram in the last couple of weeks. But thank you so much for doing that. It genuinely warms my heart every time I see that it has happened. I am delighted to say that we have a good few gold-along projects that are already up and underway. But just to, again, give you a brief reminder of what it is that we're looking to do. So it's a very informal knit along. Bring your whips, bring the things that are practically FOs but just aren't quite off the needles, and in all honesty, if you want to achieve a degree of solidarity with us around about that weekend, which I think is the 18th to the 20th of October, thereabouts, by wearing something gold that you've knitted previously or crocheted previously, you are more than welcome to bloom and well do so. This is really just an opportunity for us to work with some fabulous, fabulous gold things and use it as a chance to be able to kind of come together in a little bit of solidarity around that. So what I would say is, of course, whips are welcome. Of course, you're welcome to cast on something new. It can be any sort of craft that you like. It can be weaving, it can be sewing, you can do whatever you wish. We have the Glorious Goldalong thread over in the Ravelry group, which you will find linked in the show notes below, so you're more than welcome to head on over there. There's been some great chat already ongoing around that, but I think also as well, if you want to use a hashtag, I will think one up and come up with that and put it here on the screen. Let's go for Glorious Goldalong. Why not? And so that will be something that you're also able to follow along with over there. But the intention is that between now and that weekend in October, we work up something and that we wear it on those days. Now, the likelihood is that those of us who are lucky enough to be at Rhinebeck will be wearing those gold things, I believe, on the Saturday. A few people had asked me about would we try and kind of have a meetup, but I'm conscious that part of the reason for wanting to have this Glorious Goldalong is so that people who perhaps don't feel as comfortable coming along and saying hi in person are also able to embrace that little part of the day. And so I fully appreciate that not everyone will want to come along to the meetup, but what I was going to suggest is there is normally a podcaster meetup on the Saturday, and I think what we might just try and do is combine the two, really. So if you do want to come along, I will try and find out some more details about when that happens to be near the time, and we'll share those over there in the Ravelry group. But yeah, the intention is very much for us to be wearing our gold and show a little bit of support. And if that means that you are not attending Rhinebeck and you would like to do so vicariously, I would absolutely adore it. And what I'd love to do, and what I will be doing near the time, is I will create a specific thread over in Ravelry, and we'll have a specific hashtag as well, so that everyone from hopefully around the globe, should you wish to be wearing your little bit of gold on that day and taking part in a bit of a vicarious wear along, let's call it that, that we will be able to represent wherever you may be. So very much looking forward to that. But in the meantime, what this means is it's the return of the KAL-LERY. I'm so happy. So yes, it is an informal make-along. So KAL-LERY is a little bit of a misnomer. Cal usually stands for knit-along, but KAL-LERY just sounds so much better than Mallory, because Mallory's just not a thing. So I'm sticking with KAL-LERY for now, but please know it is wider and broader and deeper and taller than all of those things, many dimensions. And so I am delighted to be sharing some of the projects that are up and underway now. These have all come from the Ravelry group. I will start checking the hashtag over on Instagram going forward. If you would love for one of your projects to be featured, please do feel free to drop a picture over in the Ravelry group, and I will share some of those with each episode. But in the meantime, I want to share with you my absolute joy and delight from having gone through some of these projects, and yeah, hopefully you will see a little bit of inspiration in there too. As you can see, there are some absolutely stunning projects that are either underway, that are off the needles, that are just caked up and raring to go, that have inspiration just there and waiting for someone to make a star, and I'm so pleased and excited. Now, you might have spotted a couple of things in there. One, we are being very generous and very open with our definition of gold, and yes, if you so wish, I am going to include rose gold in there too. I appreciate gold is very much my personal colour wheelhouse, and it doesn't work for everyone. If rose gold is better for you, you crack on. We've established that my definition of gold is fairly lax, to say the least. So I am absolutely delighted to see that kicked off, and I look forward to seeing what some of the rest of you have in store as well. Elsewhere in vicarious knitting, there were a few patterns that caught my eye in the last couple of weeks that I wanted to share with you over here. The first of those is by a designer that I think, particularly if you're over on Instagram, you will have seen some of her beautiful creations in recent weeks. This is one of her latest. It's due to come out at the start of next month, and this is the Diaphanous Raglan by Jessie May, and my word, this is stunning. It bears a little bit of similarity to the As If tee, you may well have spotted that, but at the same time I love the fact that it's a very, very deep V. It has these beautiful kind of big long drapey sleeves knit in the mohair, and what I will say is with all of Jessie May's designs, so she is also the designer behind the Rippleette bra and the Ripple crop top as well, and while those aren't actually my kind of specific aesthetic, I think there are people out there that look incredible in them. It's not something I plan on knitting for myself, although never say never, whereas this is one of the designs that I can see really, really kind of working and appealing. But all of her designs have this amazing kind of sensualness to them. I just think they are such amazingly empowering designs for the female body, and it just makes me incredibly happy to see a designer really, really kind of creating those and making it such a bold statement as well. I know that again Jessie May is someone who's incredibly good at being inclusive with her designs. She's talked more recently about the fact that in order to be inclusive it means it's going to take her a little bit longer to get those designs out and published. This in particular I believe is sized from a 33.5 inch bust up to a 65.5 inch bust. Admittedly there is perhaps a little bit of room for manoeuvre there on the smaller side of things, but certainly certainly at the upper end of the scale, it is a very, very inclusive garment. And so yeah, definitely worth checking that one out. It's knit, I believe, with single ply yarn and then some mohair silk as well. And yeah, it's just absolutely beautiful. The second design that I wanted to mention is a variation on a pattern that I love the original version of too. This is the Oban cardigan by Thea Coleman, who is Baby Cocktails. The Oban sweater is a sweater that came out last year and is one I seriously contemplated knitting for Rhinebeck, but in the end it just didn't quite work out. The cardigan version is also beautiful, and yeah, I love this a lot. People who've been around for a while know how much love I have for Thea Coleman's designs. The only thing that I do find really challenging is the fact that a lot of her designs, and I believe this is one of them, are bottom up, and that is just a construction that I struggle with a little bit more. I think it's just, I've talked about this in the past, I'm more of a top-down garment person. I like being able to see the progress to get to the point where I've kind of cast on for the rest of the body, I'm done, I'm through the armholes, and then it's just powering on through. I kind of need that initial boost up front to really motivate me the rest of the way through, and as I'm finding with my as if tee at the moment, when you're going bottom up, it's just more of a slog at the outset, and so I just need to pick up the pace on that one and see where we get to. But yes, beautiful cardigan. It's knit in Aran weight yarn, I believe, and has these fabulous all over cables. Those cables also transfer to the pockets as well, and it's the detail in Thea's designs that I just find so compelling. And in terms of sizing, again, I believe it's around about a 35 inch up to around about a 60 inch. So again, a little bit of leeway on either side in an ideal world, but in terms of sizing and inclusivity, not too bad at all. And indeed, it is meant to be worn with a little bit of positive ease, so bear that in mind when it comes to sizing and selecting your size for that garment. And the final pattern that caught my eye this time around is actually a shawl pattern. And I know that's deeply unusual for me, but there was a version or kind of a similar version of this that came out previously that I adored. And seeing this version now has just turned me just straight back into it. I love the look of this. And this is the Cocoa Wrap by Olga Jazzy. It is the most beautiful 3-colour wrap. It comes in a variety of sizes. It comes in a smaller scarf and then a larger wrap version, but I love the texture and the inventiveness of Olga's designs. I think this is such a beautiful example. It helps that there's a little nudge of gold in there as well, obviously, but at the same time, I love the way that the texture plays in here, and I think this would be such a beautiful knit. Don't get me wrong, it does risk potentially being a little bit sloggy. I don't know if this is a slip stitch design or if it is a colourwork design. The Ravelry notes don't mention too much about that, but it is beautiful whatever way it happens, and certainly one that it makes a true statement. So if you're in the market for something along those lines, I think it's definitely worth taking a look at that pattern in particular. I really did mention this was going to be a pretty quick episode, and I feel terrible sort of saying that, but at the same time, I just don't have really too much more to talk to you about. And so I think I am going to call it there. I hope that this is very much a bit of a misnomer or a bit of an oddity in the general grand scheme of things. I intend to come back next time with a little bit more content for you, but I wanted to check in to talk a little bit about the fact that failure is always an option and is definitely an option that we should embrace, and still hopefully check in with all things gloriously gold as well. So it only really remains for me to wish you a wonderful rest of day, rest of week. I hope your knitting is keeping you happy and fulfilled, and if for whatever reason it isn't, I hope you have the opportunity to knit vicariously. Keep on keeping on, and I will see you again next time. Bye. You know those weeks where everything is going your way, you are on top of everything, you are killing it, taking ass, kicking pains. Yeah, not that. Now, just in case you were in any doubt as to how broad my definitions are of gold, I thought I'd maybe give you just a little sneaky, hint and peek as to exactly how broad I'm happy to go with this definition here. So all of this up to, you know, the stuff that is obviously more of the pinky, although in theory, I mean, if you wanted to call that rose gold, I'd be open to it, all right? I mean, it's more on the rose and less on the gold, but we're embracing this, it's fine. But as far as I'm concerned, this up here, all gold, stellar, you crack on. Similarly, this, all good, all good. I mean, more on the taupey side, I will give you that. Maybe not as a dominant colour, but all of these golds, perfect. Even these little bad boys here, little bit of gold in them, therefore good to go. Even these two little blonde ones here. Let me tip it down so you can see. Yeah. That one, fine. Call it gold. I'm good for that. Call these gold. I'm done. I mean, some would call it like a moss green, but fuck them. They're not here. Those people aren't here, right? No? This, gold. Oh, fine. I mean, obviously, essentially, if you want to call it gold, I'm here for it. Let's all be here for it.